There's a strange comfort in feeling nothing. No grief, no joy, just a quiet, heavy absence. It's like watching your life happen from the back row of a cinema. You see the scenes, you hear the music, but you can't reach out and touch the screen. Most people call this emptiness, but maybe it's just your mind's way of finally going quiet after years of carrying too much. Leon had already opened his eyes, despite the faint light coming through the window in the early morning hours. Sometimes it took him a moment to realize he was awake. Lately, the line between sleep and waking had grown strangely blurred. A thin crack ran across the ceiling. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe he had simply never cared enough to notice. Now he just stared at it. The small stone house stood on the inner side of a peninsula stretching toward the sea, among olive groves, on a slope descending toward the water. Leon had come here 6 weeks ago. He told himself it was for a photography project. To his friends, he simply said he needed a break from the city. He hadn't explained much. One day, he simply left the city and came here. He got up, his feet touching the cold stone floor. He went to the kitchen and filled the kettle with water. There was no hesitation in his movements. He knew how to use his hands, knew where everything was. He stood there a while, watching the blurring of the flame. He gazed out through the window. The olive branches were motionless. There was no breeze at all. At that hour, the leaves looked duller than usual, more grey than silver. While the tea was brewing, he stepped out into the garden. In front of the house stood an old stone wall on which yellow flowers had bloomed, a plant whose name he did not know. He reached out to touch one of the flowers with his finger. It felt softer than he expected, almost velvety. There was a sooty rock near the wall. Leon looked at it and thought of Linda's photographs. The travel photographs they had taken together 2 years ago. Those magnificent moments and memories of Linda laughing while sitting on a rock, the sun falling on her hair. He had never deleted those photographs. But he hadn't opened them in a while either. Until a few years ago, a moment like this would have set him thinking. He would look at something and feel a stirring inside, a small nameless feeling, an awareness of beauty. Perhaps that awareness was still there, but the melody he longed to hear was not playing inside him. It was as if music was coming from very far away, but you couldn't make out the words. You noticed the notes, you could even follow the rhythm, but you couldn't enter into the melody. He took his tea and sat on the stone wall. The sea merged with the sky on the horizon. There were a few boats, early morning fishermen. He looked at them for a long time. Then he looked at the patches on the sea. Then he turned back to the boats. He gazed at the horizon indifferently and aimlessly. The tea had gone cold. Without noticing, he drank it in one sip. Before noon, he took his camera out of the bag. He hadn't touched it in a few weeks. The zipper pull of the bag was worn down. It had broken in Lisbon, and he still hadn't had it repaired. Now he unzipped it, took out the camera, and did not think about Lisbon. He adjusted the frame and pointed it toward the olive grove, but didn't press the shutter. He pulled his eye away from the viewfinder. He felt the camera's weight in his hand, plastic and metal, a real object. It calmed him a little. He looked through the viewfinder again. The light was good, the composition was excellent. As a photographer, he registered these things automatically. But that thing inside him wasn't there. That urgency, that feeling of I must shoot this now. He set the camera down on the table. The memory card was probably still full of old photographs. He didn't check anyway. He went inside and opened the refrigerator. Eggs, cheese, a few tomatoes. He made an omelette. He ate slowly, looking at his plate. As he tore off a piece of bread, its smell reached his nose, and for a moment he paused. The scent carried him away, not to a place, but to a feeling. His father used to tear bread just like this every morning when setting the table, with the same motion, and there would be that commotion around the table, arguments with his sibling, his mother's voice. The crowdedness of that table. His father's hands were large, with prominent knuckles. When he lay in the hospital, those hands had shrunk, turned into dry piles of bone. On one visit, Leon had looked at those hands and, for a moment, had not recognized them. Then he had flinched and quickly turned his eyes elsewhere. 2 years had passed since that glance. Now he sat alone and there was no sound other than the sounds of nature. He put down the bread and placed his hand on the table. For a moment he had come to the edge of a feeling he could not name. But in an instant that spark was extinguished. He picked up his plate, took it to the kitchen and washed it. In the afternoon, he went out for a walk. This had now become a habit, a routine. He went out at the same hours every day. He took the same path, descending through the olive groves to the shore. He didn't force himself to do this. His body seemed programmed to get up at that hour, to put on his shoes. He only realized he was going for a walk once he was already outside. By the side of the path stood an old fig tree which he passed every day. Today he stopped and touched the trunk, feeling the rough, textured bark. A pair of nightingales had been singing half an hour ago. He had heard the song but hadn't paid attention to it. Now he searched for that sound in his mind but couldn't remember it. Only the bark of the tree remained beneath his hand, hard and rough. The shore was empty. In mid-September the tourists had thinned out, and the locals had retreated to their homes in the midday heat. There were small wooden piers, and on one of them a man was fishing. He observed the man's motionless, seated posture, his eyes fixed on the surface of the water, his stance accustomed to waiting. He felt something for that man, not closeness, but a familiar feeling. He saw something about his own condition in that man's posture, and this struck him and passed in an instant. He walked on the sand. His feet got wet. The water was colder than he had expected. He stopped and watched the retreating wave. Beneath his feet, the sand inside slowly shifted. This sensation was reality itself, and it had stripped him of all other thoughts. He looked at his phone. A message from Linda, sent 3 weeks ago, sat there unanswered. She had asked, "How are you?" Leon had read that message many times, attempted to write a reply several times, but had deleted everything he wrote. What could he say? If he said he was fine, it would be a lie. If he said he wasn't, he would have to explain. In the end, he had returned nothing. He became aware of the dull numbness inside him. He was just continuing. That was all. Toward evening, the phone rang. He looked at the screen. His colleague, Mert. He thought for a moment, then answered. "What are you still doing out there?" said Mert, laughing. "When are you coming back?" "I don't know," said Leon. "They are asking for you. A new project is starting. The team is gathering." "I know," said Leon. "I need more time." There was silence. The kind of silence where Mert wanted to say something but was hesitating. Leon knew this. Mert was a good person, an honest one, but he was a little clumsy when it came to talking about certain things. "Look, Leon, I know it's been a hell of a year. Your dad, then Linda. Anyone would have lost it by now. But you can't just disappear forever, man," Mert said finally. Leon looked out the window. The olive trees had darkened, turned into tiny silhouettes in the last light of sunset. "I know," he said. "It's just..." Mert paused. "I don't know. There is something different in your voice." "I'm tired," said Leon. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't entirely true either. Tiredness was something he could feel. This was different. They hung up. Leon put the phone down on the table. On the table sat an old tea glass that had left rings of lime scale on its base. He looked at those rings. His father had been bedridden for 18 months. Intensive care, discharge, intensive care again. Throughout this period, Leon had gone back and forth every week. Night drives on the highway, the cold white light of the hospital corridors, the rhythmic sound of machines. He hadn't neglected his work. He had tried to keep the relationship going, had appeared strong. One night Linda had said, "I can't see you." Not in those exact words, but that was what she had meant, and Leon had understood the problem even then, but had been unable to fix it. In the end, he had lost his father. The relationship had ended within a year, and now he was here. There was no collapse or grief inside him as he thought about all of this. It was as if he were reading someone else's life, disconnected facts, a chronology. He had accepted not feeling for so long that now he could not feel. Postponement had at some point silently turned into relinquishment. He spent the evening outside. He pulled a chair onto the stone ground in front of the house and looked up at the stars. In this village there was little light pollution. The Milky Way was visible, faint but there. He noticed it was beautiful, but this didn't produce any satisfaction in him. A bark came from the distance. A car passed on the road, its headlights filtering through the olive trees and then disappearing. He saw all of it. Still, it felt distant, like watching life from the back of a cinema. Suddenly, a wind picked up, and the olive branches and leaves rustled. This sound carried him back to memories of the past, to the olive grove where they had spent their summer holidays as children, to his grandmother, to the rustling branches of the olive grove and the pure wonder inside that child, to that feeling where the world seemed infinite. His grandmother smelled of mothballs and lavender. He couldn't remember ever smelling that scent again in all the years since. A brief wave of feeling passed through and was gone. Leon instinctively placed his hand on his chest. He had felt a small stirring. It flared and faded like a flame of straw. Toward midnight he went inside. He picked up the camera again. This time he didn't look through the viewfinder. He simply held it, felt it in his palm. Then he put it down on the table. Next to it was a small leather case. Linda had given it as a gift, saying, "It's something like you." And he hadn't asked why she had said that. Now he looked at that case. He felt a faint ache inside. He thought, maybe tomorrow I will go out and take some photographs. He lay down in bed. The crack on the ceiling was there again. This time, looking at it, a thought passed through his mind. Who had placed that house on that slope? Who had brought those stones together? Who had built that wall? And what they had felt at the time. Then that thought too passed. Before falling asleep at that threshold, he thought about himself for a moment. His brain was still working, still making observations, still forming connections. Not everything had stopped. Something was moving inside, very slowly, very deeply, like the movement of something large swimming underwear. Imperceptible on the surface, but there. Maybe nothing changed suddenly. Maybe something deep inside was simply moving upward, very slowly. The wind in the trees, the wonder of that child he once was, sand shifting under his feet, the rough leather case, his grandmother's faint scent of mothballs and lavender. All of these things were still there. They hadn't disappeared. They were simply waiting. His eyes closed. When morning came, he filled the kettle and lit the stove. He looked outside through the window. This time the olive trees were gleaming silver in the first light. He saw this, and something stirred inside him, a feeling he couldn't name but recognized. So, if you ever find yourself in that long grey hallway where everything feels muted, don't panic. Numbness isn't always the end of feeling. Sometimes it's just where the mind goes to rest. Your mind hasn't forgotten how to feel. It's simply waiting for the storm to pass. Because even a cold stone floor eventually feels the morning sun. And sometimes just noticing the light on the leaves is enough of a start.